Hey, it's the Indy Drills podcast. I'm Chad Wilson, owner of All Eyes DB Camp and author of 101 DB Tips. Happy to be here with you guys as we get into both the college and the NFL football season. I know high school football has already kicked off, and we've already been through week 0 and week 1 of high school football. So for all of you guys that have started off your seasons, I hope you have kicked the season off the right way. If you haven't, time to get your act together. And one great way that you can do that is by picking up a copy of this book right here, 101 DB Tips. It is over 100 of the best DB tips you will ever get in your lifetime. Over 20 years of experience put together. Listen, I've been through this a couple times already, so here's what happens, okay, with stuff like this. Guys will start off the season, and maybe they had some ideas about how the season was going to go for them. And when it doesn't go that way, it's now that they start reaching out for help, and that's when book sales really start picking up, like 3-4 weeks into the season. That's when people start running to join the All Eyes DB Camp members area 3-4 weeks into the season. I've got news for you. The way to do this is to get the book, join the members area before any of that stuff ever happens to you, guys. You don't buy car insurance after you've had the accident, all right? That's not how that works. You don't buy the security system or the gun to protect your home after you've been robbed and tied up and they've wiped out all of your belongings and taken everything from you. It's not how you want to live life. You get the book. You never find yourself in that situation where you have the 3-4 game bad streak. You know what a 3-4 game bad streak gets you? It gets you sent to the bench. And now you're fighting for the rest of the season to try to get back in the lineup. If you're a senior in high school trying to get a college football scholarship and you don't have offers or there's lukewarm interest, you know what a 3-4 game bad streak does for you? It probably puts you in the crowd and not on the stage on signing day. All right, so you don't want to get yourself into that position. Get ahead of the game. Pick up a copy of 101 DB Tips. Covers everything in there that you need. How to cover man, zone, how to play safety, nickelback, corner, how to study film. Everything you need to know is right here in this book. And then the members area has videos, over 200 videos on everything. Coverages explained, DB drills, tips, techniques, all of that stuff in you. And you don't want to wait till you have a bad part of the season to do this thing. So go ahead and pick up a copy of the book right now. Link in the description down below. Tons of great resources for you. If this is your first time here on the channel, you haven't had a chance to do it already, go ahead and hit the subscribe button. This is the #1 place for DB info, training, and things of that ilk. That's if you are watching me on YouTube. If you are following me, if you're listening to this on your, whether it's Spotify or it's Apple Podcast or Anchor, anything like that, hit the subscribe button. You will not be disappointed. All right, that's enough of that stuff. We've got some things to get into today. There's some DB news out there that we need to check in on. And, you know, it was that time of the year yesterday, or a couple of days ago, I should say, by the time you're watching this, where guys got a pink slip and some dreams might have taken a detour or even crushed. I'm talking about NFL Cutdown Day. We'll talk about that and some more. I'm going to talk about watching football with a purpose today. I see a lot of young guys watching football and kind of doing it the wrong way. I'm going to turn your mind onto how you need to watch the game so you can get better at playing the game if you happen to be a player and not just a fan. Now, we're going to talk about some techniques in the slot. I got a pretty good question that asked me, something that I think guys need to consider, and especially coaches too that might be wrestling with this. More on that coming up. And then I'm going to talk to you. Our main topic is talking to you about something that is going to prevent you guys, some of you out here that are players, from reaching your full potential. All right, there's guys out there with a lot of athletic ability. A lot it's from a physical standpoint, but there is this one thing that is going to keep you from reaching your full potential. So you're going to want to stay tuned for that. All right, so what's in the news? Like I said, it was cut down day. And there are some lessons to be learned from there. Obviously, on any cut down day, there are some big surprises. There are some big names. There's some guys that come, to the end of their career, and they may have had really great careers. Listen, the truth of the matter is football typically ends for the football player before they want it to end. kind of how this thing ends. Very few guys ride off into the sunset. Very few guys make an announcement that this will be my final season and they get all of the hoopla. That's usually not how that works. It usually comes in the form of being cut from a team unexpectedly or being cut from several teams. And this could even be guys that were big time all-stars, all pros, or, you finish your last contract with the team, you don't get picked up in the next off season, and then you just, it kind of ends for you, but you weren't really ready for it to end. It got ended for you. And that's just really the harsh realities of the game of football. But for other guys, you're just trying to get started with your NFL career and you get yourself a pink slip. Man, there's a lot of guys that want to play this game versus very few spots for guys that want to play this game. Here's one big thing that I have learned through my playing experience and through training and coaching guys and seeing them come and go. The special teams part of this thing is a really, really big part of a guy sticking to a roster. And I'm going to speak right now to guys that are really big time players in high school and you don't play special teams because you don't need to. You're a big time star. And special teams is for the other guys on the team. Or maybe guys that are in college right now and you're a future first round pick, second round pick. You're really, really valuable to your team at your position, whether that's corner, safety, nickelback, whatever. And they don't have you on any special teams or very few special teams. Do yourself a favor, and sometimes I know what it's like talking to guys at this age. You don't think you'll ever find yourself in that position. There's so many great players that think things are going to go one way in the NFL, and then they don't. Some things are out of your control, and you find yourself in a situation. And I'm telling you, if you find yourself in a situation where you need to be on special teams to make the team, and you didn't play special teams at high school because you were too good for that, you didn't really play it in college because you were too good for that, you are going to have deep regrets when you get to this NFL level. I notice the guys that stick on NFL teams that are not starters, okay? So you're not a Jalen Ramsey. You're not a Patrick Surtain. You're not one of these top guys you're not the team's number one corner. You're not the team's number one safety, like, just name guys out there. You're not that number one safety. You are not valuable to the team, and the front office doesn't see a point of having you there if you're not on special teams. So you have to take an interest in special teams. I would say do that while you're young. Take an interest in it. And just for the hell of it, if your team has you, if you're in high school and they have you on 0 special teams, go to your coach and tell him you'd like to be on at least one. Just pick one. If it's you want to run down on a kickoff and knock someone's head off, do that. If you want to get on the punt protection team, do that. If you're a big-time 5-star or you're the best player on your football team as a defensive back and there is a special teams unit that is struggling and you're not asking to get on it, I've got to question you as a player. I got to question you as a football player. What you really want to do in these young years is become the best football player that you can be. And that means being able to do several things. And that means, of course, they want you to run back punts and kickoffs, and you have that ability and they can see that in you, do that. Get involved in it. Those things are easy, though. Those things bring you the glory. But can you come off the edge and block a punt? Can you protect the punt? Can you protect the punter? Can you run down and be a gunner? Can you stop the gunner from getting down the field? Can you run down on kickoff? Can you be on the kick return team and set up and block for someone else when you're the one not getting the ball? I'm telling you right now, if you're a younger player, high school, college, get involved in the special teams. If you're a youth football player, right, and you're a parent of a youth football player, man, teach the importance of special teams, because if you get this far, it would be a shame for your NFL dream to get cut short because you can't do anything on special teams. The guys that stick on rosters that are not the number one guys are the guys that can add the special teams part to it. You really can't be sitting on the sidelines on game day. You're not playing at corner or safety, and you're just not on any of the special teams. DBs make up most of the special teams. We're the best athletes on the team. And if you can't do anything on special teams, they just won't keep you. You might actually be better than the guy that they keep, but he's on special teams. And so he has value on game day. And if the starter gets hurt, he's already on the team. He gets to go in there. Now, mind you, you might be better than him as a straight up corner. You might be better than him as a safety, but you don't actually start. So, from game to game, what's your value? If that starter doesn't get hurt, you're taking up a roster spot. And when you have a limited roster, as they do in the NFL, it's like all hands on deck, especially athletes like defensive backs. So, some of you will listen to this and others of you will not. Those of you who listen to it and years down the road, you find yourself in this situation where you have hung on to a team and there were guys that were better than you and they're at home and they're not playing anymore or they're not on a roster and you will be thankful that you listened to this Indy Drills podcast right here and listen to Chad Wilson tell you, get involved in special teams, take an interest in special teams, a genuine interest in special teams. So like really get into it and want to understand how you win in the special teams. And I dare say like become a specialist. If you can become a specialist in one specific thing, so you're really good at blocking kicks, or even if you could become a holder. I mean, that's typically for quarterbacks, snapping the ball, anything. You just want to be on that field. And you might get to a point in your career where you're just trying to extend your career, just try to keep playing. And if you're a guy that could do this one thing on special teams, punt protection, whatever it is, you're going to bring value to the team. If you're a backup and you don't play special teams, I'm going to tell you right now, I don't care who you think you are, you don't have any value to an NFL team as a defensive back. All right, I think I've made my point there. A surprising name on the cut down list was Caleb Farley, former number one pick, or former first round pick. Let me not say number one pick. Former first round pick out of Virginia Tech. You guys remember him. Kind of blew up his pro day, 4.2 guy. I will say this, he's been through a lot in this league. He's lost both of his parents within this first few years of being in the league. He suffered through some really terrible injuries that have kept him off the field. To this point, his biggest dream in his life has become a bit of a nightmare. And it ends with him with the Tennessee Titans as they released him. I had the pleasure of having Caleb Farley come to one of my sessions this offseason. I'm going to tell you something right now. He is extremely explosive. You could see the guy that ran a 4.2, despite the injuries that he had. Very explosive out of his breaks, very explosive in his change of direction. He's going to end up on another team. It's just which team. And can he, free himself of the demons that have gotten in his way, the things that have gotten in the way of his career, both mentally and physically. If he can ever just put it all together, get on the right track here, he's going to pay off for some team. And if I had to guess where he would end up, I know the Giants were kicking the tires on Caleb Farley, but I just have this feeling he's going to end up in Indianapolis. I know Colts GM Chris Ballard was very fond of Caleb Farley when he was coming out. He just was not going to use a first-round pick on a cornerback that year, and so he ended up in Tennessee. But I would not be surprised, we can mark this, if Caleb Farley ended up in the Colts, because A, they have that need. All right, the Colts are still trying to figure out their corner situation, and B, the GM likes this guy, and C, he definitely physically has the tools. It's just a matter of it all lining up and trying to stay healthy. Some guys, they just run into a bad streak of injuries. There's injuries left and right. I know that firsthand. My son Quincy went through that. Just an injury here and an injury there, and you weren't injury prone in college. It just started happening now when you reach the NFL, and that can be difficult. But I was surprised to see Caleb Farley on that list. But you get a new GM, new regime. They didn't draft you. They start looking at the numbers on the page and the amount that you were going to make this year, and the fact that you haven't really been able to contribute in a way that you would want a first-round pick to contribute. And so things happen. But he's out there, and I'm going to be anxious to see where he ends up, and really rooting for the guy to get some healthy seasons under his belt, just so we can see what it is that he can do. And he's a pretty solid individual as well, having met him personally. Seems like a guy who's, got things together upstairs mentally. James Bradbury, who moved from corner for the Eagles to a safety spot. And kudos to James Bradbury. I saw an interview with him earlier in training camp where he spoke about how he really didn't play well last year, big ups on him, really owning up to that, and then making the move to safety. As he's a guy who's getting a little older in his career, was never really a burner at that cornerback position. So you start to lose a step. Everyone does as they play long enough in this game. And heady enough to make that move inside, and he decided to do it. Unfortunately, suffers an injury that's probably going to keep him out for 6 to 8 weeks. I know a couple of weeks ago I was talking about being anxious to see the combination of Trayvon Diggs and Deron Bland. That gets upended, at least in the beginning of the season, because Deron Bland has also suffered an injury that's going to keep him out for 6 to 8 weeks. So we could probably not have him for the first 4 games of the year, which really sucks, because I was anxious to see two extreme ball hawks playing on the same team on opposite ends of each other. I really wanted to see how teams went about attacking that, and just watching the nerves being racked of all of these quarterbacks out there. But nevertheless, hoping a speedy recovery for Deron Bland so he can get back into the action. But that's it for current events. Again, I just want to hit this point home again. Special teams, guys, you got to jump on the special teams. Something I wanted to talk about here, because we're getting into this early part of the year, and I was a high school football player once. Here's what had to happen for me. All right, I did not grow up in the YouTube era, a Twitter era, where you had clips all over the place and you could learn from things. There's so much that you can learn about the game just being on Twitter and YouTube that it's insane. And it's obviously, I guess I take more note of it because these things were not available for me when I was playing high school ball. I desperately wanted to learn a lot about playing corner. I was primarily a running back and wide receiver in high school. I did play defensive back, but it was not a primary thing. It was not certainly what I was thinking about the most. I wanted to score touchdowns. I wanted the ball in my hand. So like a lot of guys at that age, I loved playing running back and playing wide receiver. But I kind of, came to the realization that defensive back was going to be my future, and I wanted to learn as much as I could about it. And there was no internet, there was no YouTube, there was no just going on Twitter and learning like that. So I had to tape games, all right? There was something known as a VHS for you young bucks out there. You put the tape in, you had to find out when the game was going to be played. If you weren't going to be at home at that time, and you set the little buttons and it records the game for you. Or if you were home at that time, you just hit record while the game was on. And I would sit there and run the tape back over and over and over and watch the techniques and watch how the game was being played. And I learned like that. I think so many players let that opportunity go to the wayside. A lot of players now will watch games on TV and you're looking at the wrong thing. You guys are looking at a guy's swag. You're looking at his cleats. You're looking at his gloves. You're looking at the type of helmet he's got on. You guys know all the types of helmets. Man, I never knew that kind of stuff. There was a bike helmet and a Rydell helmet. Give me a helmet. Let me go play football. So you guys are all into the equipment. That's cool. I will say the equipment is a whole lot more cooler than anything we were putting on. So I understand you being mesmerized by that kind of stuff. Trust me, I like to look the best when I was out on the field too, so I get it. We didn't have that much to choose from. You guys got a whole lot more, so I understand that holding some piece of your attention. But if you're watching the game and you're not watching the game with a purpose, I think you're doing yourself a really, really big disservice. As much as football is available to you in this day and age, it is a crying shame if guys don't understand the game at all, which are some guys out there playing, have a limited knowledge of it because it's so accessible. Going to go back to my childhood again, my adolescent years, my teenage years, my high school years. You got a football game on Saturday. If you wanted to watch college football, you got a football game on Sunday. And if your mom or dad lets you stay up late enough, you can watch a Monday night football game. There was no Tuesday football. There's no Wednesday. They didn't have Thursday night football until I got much older. Nothing on Friday, and your Friday was your own high school football game, and hopefully you're new enough to play well in that, and that's how it went. You guys have got football on demand whenever you want it. You can learn more about it. You can learn about how the game is played. So while you're here just watching football games, if you're going to watch it, let's watch the things with a purpose. And how do you do that? If you're a defensive back, one of the best things you can do for yourself is sit down, watch a football game, and just play this game of trying to guess what play the offense is going to run next. You keep doing that enough over and over again by watching games, you'll be surprised how it can kind of pop up for you when you're actually playing on Friday night, or if you're a college player on Saturday. You're going to just, by conducting this exercise, you will get so good at it that it'll kind of just matriculate into your game while you are actually playing. And how do you figure out what a team's going to do next? You use stuff like down and distance. It's 2nd and 10. What is this team most likely to do? You could look at the formations. Hey, did they have 2 tight ends in the game, 3 tight ends in the game? Where's the running back lined up? What do I see the quarterback doing? What are the splits of the wide receivers? Start doing that. Start watching the game with a purpose. What part of the field are they on? Do they run different plays when they're near their own 20-yard line, near their own goal line, as opposed to what they run in midfield? And then what type of plays they like to run down by the red zone? You can make yourself a really smart player by doing this consistently, actively, as you watch college football games or even high school football games that you might be watching that don't involve you. You know, last week they had those kickoff classics, so big matchups out there. Chaminade playing St. John Bosco. There was Bishop Gorman versus St. Thomas. There was American Heritage playing Milton. So if you're watching one of those games and you happen to be a high school football player, even better, because that's, if you're a high school football player, that's football at your level that you're watching. And if you can kind of predict what coaches at that level are going to call, I promise you, when you get in your own football games, you're going to be better at predicting what's coming next, being able to have some anticipation, and you're going to find yourself around the football a whole lot more. But watch the game with a purpose. Hell, when sometimes flip around and try to say to yourself, hey, what's the defense doing? What coverage was that defense in? That's how you're going to learn the game, by just actively watching it and not just sitting there and getting mesmerized. Don't watch it like a fan, okay? Because you're not a fan. You actually suit up and play the game. I'd say the same thing for you young coaches as well. If you're a young coach, you have to do that. Okay, I don't care if you're just a position coach at this point. At some point, you may want to become a coordinator, offensive or defensive coordinator. But I'm mainly talking to defensive coordinators now, guys that are on that defensive side of the ball that may end up being that at some point. You've got to watch football that way. You have to sit there and try to predict what plays are coming next. Because when you're a defensive coordinator, that's the job. That's what you're doing. Excuse me. You are basically trying to predict what that offensive coach is going to call next and have a defense set up to stop it. So why not get as much practice as possible with that by watching the games with a purpose in mind, trying to predict what they are going to call next? 2nd and 6, what's most likely to happen here? Now that I see the formation, what do I think is coming? You'll start to notice things about what most offenses do. A lot of these offenses are the same. The concepts are the same. Sometimes they pretty it up with kind of all kinds of formations and maybe motions, but by and large, everyone's doing the same thing. There's certain things that have to be done offensively that you can't deviate from if you want your quarterback protected, or if you want the run play to work, or if you want the routes to end up in areas where they're not bumping into the guys, or you don't have 2 wide receivers in the same spot. I know you guys play video games. I know you guys play Madden. I know you guys play NCAA, and you get some practice with that stuff. That's fine. But don't turn that stuff off when you're watching a football game, all right? If I know it, every now and then you're watching a big rivalry game, you're there with your friends, you're maybe not fully paying attention. Maybe that's a time when you don't do that, and you just say, hey, I'm going to watch this game as a fan today. But most of the time that you watch with a purpose. And one of the biggest ways to do that is just say, hey, let me try and figure out what plays are going to be coming next. And then you'll start to find ways to find out what plays are coming next. And that's watching football with a purpose and learning from it. Whether you are a player or you are a coach, you are definitely going to benefit from being able to do that. All right. So that's a big tip for you guys out there, coaches and players. You are going to benefit from that. All right, I got a good question. All right, and from a listener here, and I really do love that you guys send in these questions. I love answering them. I love having that here to answer here on the show. So once again, if you have a DB question, anything at all, there's no dumb question. Everyone starts playing this game at some point, and when you start playing, you have questions. So someone 5 years down the road playing, does not have the same question that someone who's just started playing has. So don't be scared to ask a question because, you feel like you might look stupid. The guys 5 years with experience playing started at some point. And when they started, they didn't know what it is that you're asking. So forget about all that. Make sure you get that question. And you can use the comment section if you're watching me on YouTube to ask that question. I will reiterate this again. But Ronnie from Virginia Beach asked me this question. Hi, I'm coaching. I'm in my first year coaching defensive backs down here in the high school, and covering in the slot, we run man coverage. What is the better technique to use? Catch technique or scooch? Very good question, Ronnie. All right, here's my answer on this. The best technique to use actually is both. If you have the ability to teach both of those techniques, you are doing your defensive backs a great service. Here's why. Because there will be some situations where catch technique works best. What are those situations? 3rd and 4, 3rd and 5, something like that, where you really need to smother a route. You're most likely to get a quick slant or a quick a flat route or a hitch or something like that. Quarterback just wants to catch the ball, get it out of his hand, have a guy catch the ball at or near the sticks and just make one move and get the yards to gain and, flip the downs over and get back to a first down. In those situations, you want to be able to run catch technique. If you're down in the red zone and you have the end line as a friend of yours because, you can't catch the ball beyond the end line, it acts as a defender. Catch technique works best. All right. The space down there is limited. The ball comes out fast. You want to be able to play catch technique. Now, if you are way down in the opponent's territory, which can make DBs nervous, or there's a long yardage situation and it makes no sense really trying to smother a route at 5 yards or so, team needs to get 12, 15 yards, and you're playing some kind of man, then scooch technique might work better for a player there. You're going to give a little bit of ground. You can be a little bit looser. Maybe you, in that situation, give up a catch in front of you, but it's not the end of the world if you come up, make the tackle, and keep a guy from getting a first down. Scooch technique might work a little better for you in those situations. So if you have a defensive back that's able to be good, fairly good at both of those things, then now you can apply. You can tell the players what technique to use in what situations, in what specific coverages, and so on and so forth. The other thing is some guys are just going to be better at one technique or the other. So if you're teaching both, you don't eliminate certain players because they can't run that technique. So if you're hell-bent on a guy, and I've made this mistake at a point in my career where I just said you're playing catch technique and you can play nothing else, and it doesn't really suit the player. Could be physical stature, maybe they're not as big, or just mentally it's not something that they can grasp very well. There's a mental block, a barrier there. Rather than having that player just sitting on the sidelines because he can't play this one technique that you want him to use. I think I talked about this some about, techniques out on the edge, whether it was hard press or soft press. If you give him the ability to use either or, that's a player now that's available to you that you can put into the game at some point, and he can go out there and play with confidence and not cost you guys a first down, yardage, a game, give up big plays because, you're only allowing him to play this one technique. So being able to do both of those things is going to be a plus for that player as well. And then he can go out there and just use the technique that he feels really, really comfortable with, no matter what the situation. All right. So that's another plus as well. For me to sit here and tell you which one is better, I can't really give you that answer. It depends on the type of personnel that you have, depends on the kind of defense you guys want to run. I'm a guy that prefers catch technique. It just fits in with the whole thing of me wanting to be physical in the secondary. I like hard press on the outside. I like catch technique in the slot, and I want to make wide receivers change their path to their ultimate end. Okay, I don't want them to run in a straight line. I don't want him to run the route the way that it looks in the playbook. That's just the guy. That's just the guy in me that once coached on the offensive side of the ball and knows how much problems physicality in the secondary can cause for you when you're trying to put an offense together and trying to have some flow in your passing game. But that doesn't mean you have to do that. You have to be able to judge your players, know what they're going to be good at. And again, if you can give them the opportunity to do both, fine. But I know what happens. Sometimes you don't have a broad range as a coach, and that's not a slight on you. You learned one thing, you became really good at it. That's all you ever learned. That's what you know. And then, therefore, that's what you're going to teach. You're not going to feel comfortable coaching some other technique you're not familiar with or that, A, you don't really believe in. All right. So it's great if you have the ability to coach both, teach both. I would say for you to strive for that. So if you're really good at, let's say, teaching scooch technique, spend some of your time in the off season going to someone that's good with catch technique and learn how to do that and bring it back and do that for your players. If you're a player and you really good at catch technique, spend some time learning how to do the scooch technique because it's always good to have multiple tools in your belt. Learn that other technique. Don't throw it aside and say it's terrible. I see DB coaches fighting over this all the time. Well, the technique that I use, that's the only one that should be used. It's the best technique. And no, you should do nothing else. Well, you don't want to handcuff your players when you do that. All right. Guys come in all different kinds of shapes and sizes. And I often use this analogy. If you were a baseball coach, you would not come up to your players and tell them everyone has to have the same batting stance when they get up to the plate. You would not have a very good hitting team. Okay. Some guys are going to crouch. Some guys are going to lean back. Some guys are going to be straight up. Some guys are going to have a closed stance. Some guys are going to have an open stance. All that matters is that they put the bat to the ball and they put the ball in play. And that's all we really want as DB coaches. We want players to be able to execute the coverage. If it's a man coverage and they can stick to a wide receiver's hip using a scooch technique, then they let them use that scooch technique if you can teach it. If they are better off attaching themselves to a wide receiver in man coverage from a catch technique, then you let them use that. And, a really, really good coach that's trying to expand and do the best for his players can teach them both. So at this point, I'm really just repeating myself. Ronnie, the real answer is know your players. And it sounds, if you're asking me this question, that you feel like you can coach either one of those or you're willing to coach either one of those. So really learn your players. Spend some time teaching them both. If you realize that most of your guys or all of your guys are really good at one or the other, then go with that. If you have a situation where your guys can learn both and it helps the team, teach them both. And then now you go about teaching them the times when they need to use both of these things. And now you've made a really, really complete DB, a guy that's going to be able to survive in any situation. Inevitably, at some point, they're going to end up somewhere with a coach that's shoving a technique down their throat. And it would be good if they have the ability to do either or and please that coach. Because ultimately, I will say this to all of you guys out there, especially you guys that go to trainers, and the trainer is not the guy that's coaching at the high school. I've coached, so I know this whole dynamic. You, as a trainer, can't go and teach a kid a technique when the high school coach or the college coach absolutely wants them to do something different than that, and they're a stickler for it. And by stickler means, if you don't do this technique the way that I'm showing you, you're not playing. You're killing your player as a trainer if you are teaching them this technique that's completely different than what the coach is teaching them at the school, and the coach is insisting that they run this technique. You have pretty much sent your player to the bench. All right? So it's in your best interest to learn as many of these things as you can, both as the player as well as the coach or the trainer, I should say. All right, time for our main topic here, and this one's near and dear to me. Like I said, we got to cut down day, and you guys are early in your season. You may have a new coach, or you may have a coach that you've had for several years, and you just don't have the greatest experience with that coach, or whatever the case may be. I just feel this on my heart. I feel like this is a good time to talk to you guys about this particular topic. It's not just about your physical aspects. We talk about that all the time, train that all the time. I'm running guys through drills. Guys are running, guys are lifting, guys are jumping. You're working on all the physical stuff. 80% of this game is mental. And, my job as a trainer at this point now is to improve footwork, agility, movement skills, things of that nature. While this is true, football doesn't just stop there, right? The fastest feet are of no use if a guy doesn't know where to go, or if they don't take them to the place where they need to be. I've, I had 2 decades of coaching and training football players over that at this point. And as you can imagine, I've seen hundreds of guys come through and play ball, come and go. Some have been below average in terms of their athleticism, and some of those guys have made it to the highest levels, while, others had Hall of Fame talent and they couldn't even make it off of the high school football field. The major reason for both situations is the mental side of the game. Many young athletes forget the mental aspect of sports. One of the major reasons that it occurs is because it doesn't provide the ability to measure. You can't really measure the mental stuff. There isn't a clock there to measure the mental stuff that goes on in football. So it's very difficult for guys to gauge that. There's just not a measurement. Another reason why is it's embraced as boring. All right. Life is funny like that. Oftentimes, the boring things are the ones that's going to take you the farthest. And unfortunately, it's not the things that we focus on. So, like reading a book, for example. When I speak of the mental side of football, I'm not just talking about remembering the plays. I'm also talking about your approach to training and study. I also mean your relationships with your teammates and your coaches. This is a big part of football that guys just want to ignore. They think they could play the biggest team game ever by being in a bubble. These things matter, and they can ultimately elevate you, or they can end you. I've seen guys with a ton of talent that just got ended because they can't communicate. They can't get along with players and coaches, and then their career just ends and they're bitter. They're usually very bitter about it, or they're just very bitter in general in life. The first part of the mental side to reaching your full potential is you got to know the game. And that's a little bit about what I've talked about in this podcast today. But I'm going to expand a little more on that. It's difficult for you to win any game without knowing the rules. I don't care what it is, chess, checkers, card games. You guys aren't going to win your spade games if you don't know the rules, all right? You're not winning at that. Same thing when it comes to football. You should show a certain amount of skill in the game at some point. That's just not going to get you past not knowing the rules. You're going to just get defeated by the rules. Similarly, if you don't understand how your defense works and you don't understand how offenses attack you, it won't be long before you're taken advantage of. I've seen tremendous athletes spun around and just completely defeated mentally on the football field. All right. You've got to make it a point to have a full understanding of every defense that's presented to you. Don't just know your job. Know how the whole thing works. It's going to make you knowing your job a whole lot easier. And I promise you, this is one big whole puzzle. This means, know what the linebacker's doing if you're playing corner. That allows you to communicate with him. Sometimes, linebacker doesn't notice something. You notice it. You know where he's supposed to be. You feel comfortable communicating to that guy. You can get him to his spot, which allows you to make a play on the guy that's in front of you. It's as simple as that. All right. Communication on the field is important, especially on defense as they're out there attacking you. You can only communicate if you not only know your job, but you know the jobs of all the people around you. Now, the second part of the mental side of reaching your full potential is in your behavior. Some feel that football is the place you can go to escape the pressures of having to conform. So you don't really love school or whatever the case may be. You don't love all that stuff, but you got to go to school so you can get out to the football field. And when I get to the football field, I escape all this stuff. I don't have to do all of these things they're asking me to do in the classroom and in school. You're going to find out sooner rather than later. And I'm opting, if I'm you, I would opt for sooner. You're going to find out a lot of those things also apply to football. All right. It's not entirely true that you just get to escape. The only thing you really get to do on that football field is run into people. Can't do that. I don't recommend that you do that in class, in school, in your hallways. There are rules when you can and cannot make those hits on a football field, right? You can't hit a guy on his way back to the huddle. So there are rules, just like you've got rules in school and just in general life. On the way to being able to take your frustrations out, you have to be able to channel those frustrations and where you deposit them. Failing to establish a respectful relationship with your teammates, as well as your coaches, will result in you no longer having a place to go and hit people. Football's taken away from you. hey, that very thing you love, going and being able to run into people without facing dire consequences, that'll be taken away from you. And now where are you going to get your frustrations out? There's still rules. So make it a point of channeling your frustrations and learn some communication skills. I'm sorry. Society's rules, you will still have to follow. They're going to follow you onto the football field. However, if you can embrace these rules, not only can you reach your potential as a football player, but you can get better at life as well. Football is one of the best teachers of life. I'm here to tell you that as this older guy that's already done all the football playing and now he's coaching football. It's one of the best sports at teaching you how life works. So respect your coaches. You're going to do this by following their rules. Yes, you're going to need to do that. You're going to get better at this by paying attention when they're instructing you and giving them 100% effort when they ask you to. Your coach is a human being with emotions, and another person out there he must also answer to. Also, developing a meaningful relationship with your teammates. Football is not tennis, all right? It's a team sport, and the ultimate one at that, as I said before. You do not have to be best friends with the players on your team. You don't have to be best friends with all of your teammates, but becoming the best version of you depends on the level of respect you're able to obtain from the other boys, men that suit up in your colors. You're going to always remember your relationships and how things were in that locker room. Keep this mental part of football in your mind as you strive towards your goals on the gridiron. The more you embrace it, the less obstacles you will have to climb to reach to your destination. If you really take in on the part on learning the game and you really learn how to communicate and establish good relationships with your coach and your teammates, these things are going to last a lifetime. They're going to help you in your regular and your normal life, whether football is a part of that for a long time or not. Trust me on this. If you fail to uphold the mental side of football and you just don't embrace that part of it, you're going to exhaust yourself climbing the walls because the hurdles are going to get there in front of you, and you're going to constantly you're going to constantly have to go over them. You can start eliminating some of these hurdles towards your success by embracing this mental side of it. Hope you guys took what I said to heart. All right, that's it for my time here. We learned a lot during this time. Again, if you guys have any questions or comments, if you're watching me on YouTube, you can hit that comment section. Or you can send me an email to cwilson@alleyeasdbcamp.com. Again, that's cwilson@alleyeasdbcamp.com, especially if you guys out there that you have some questions about defensive back play, and a lot of you do. Don't hold those questions. Send them out to me, and I might read yours on my next Indy Drills podcast, so feel free to do that. On your way out, guys, hit the link down in the description. I will have more information on 101 DB tips, and you guys can go ahead and pick up a copy of this or join the All Eyes DB Camp members area. Once again, the time to do this is not after you've had 2-3 bad games this season. That's not the time to do this, all right? Get the insurance before your car gets hit. Get the alarm before they rob your house. Get 101 DB tips before you get bombed. Join the members area before someone gets 100 yards of receiving on you. That's the time to do it. Don't wait down the road. It's an investment in you that's definitely going to pay off. All right. One last thing, you guys, like and subscribe and go ahead and rate this. I've been failing to tell you guys about that. Ratings do help, as I'm finding out. So if you like the Indy Drills podcast, be sure to take some time out to rate this podcast. Give it a really big 5 stars and drop a nice comment in there for me. It gets more eyes to the Indy Drills podcast. I don't want to bring a nice big community here for DBs because everyone just wants to talk about wide receivers, of fantasy sports and all that stuff. Aren't you tired of that? We need to get a little DB Nation going here. So go ahead, like, subscribe, rate, do all that good stuff on the way out. All right. Think I've talked enough. I'm out of here. Indy Drills podcast. Thank you guys for listening and watching. See you guys next time.